The analytics world has completely changed football. I feel like it started with baseball and then moved into basketball and now football, and stats and tendencies and analytics and different areas of the game have moved and shaken and changed, and it is for the better, and it helps you understand who's going to be successful in what they're doing, who's not, and everything like that. And we have an awesome stat for you. I have an awesome stat for you. I like to say we, like talking for me and Chris, but I have an awesome stat for all of you guys about David Montgomery. And I think let's start with what we know, and then we'll get into what the stat is and what it means going forward. I think what we know is that David Montgomery and Jamaal Williams have very similar stat lines, almost the exact same yards per attempt or yards per carry, however you want to say it. Similar amount of carries last year, or at least previously. They both, I mean, Jamaal Williams got into the end zone a lot last year. David Montgomery has always gotten into it at a decent rate, but on paper, they look like very similar running backs. But how they get those yards is extremely different. And we talked on this show about how we feel David Montgomery is a big upgrade because he has more wiggle. He has better vision. He can make people miss. Whereas Jamaal Williams is more of a, I'm going to get you what you give me back. I think David Montgomery is, I'm going to give you what you get me back, but I'm also going to get a little bit more. Neither one of them have blazing speed or anything like that. So what is the stat that we're looking at? First off, let me apologize. On this article, I've never seen more ads in my life. So it's talking about this. It's talking about how what it seems like should be an even swap between David Montgomery and Jamaal Williams. But Brett Whitfield tweeted this out. And what we see is that per fantasy points data, new Lions running back David Montgomery was tied for the highest forced missed tackle rate among all backs with 125 plus carries. Who is he tied with? None other than Nick Chubb, a dude who can do some serious business. Now, does Nick Chubb have better breakaway speed than David Montgomery? Yes. Does Nick Chubb have more power than David Montgomery? Yes. But we're not talking about broken tackle rate. We are talking about forced missed tackle rate. In other words, a defender was in position to make the tackle. They were in position to make the tackle, and the running back made them miss. Forced missed tackle, not ran through it, not got extra yards. This isn't yards after touch, or anything like that. This is simply who made people miss. Something that I think fans in Detroit really appreciate. When you just make a guy miss, it's bred in us. Being a Detroit Lions fan growing up, watching Barry Sanders, it is bred in me. I love running backs who make defenders miss more than I love running backs that run over defenders. And in case you're wondering where our former one was, and it says here, for comparison's sake, they also shared the number of Williams. He was near the bottom of the league with a .12. Okay. He will be missed. And it says here, while he certainly will be missed, it can be argued that the Lions have a more dangerous offense now with David Montgomery sliding into the backfield along DeAndre Swift. We've spent a lot of time talking about David Montgomery on this show. And I think the reason we've spent a lot of time talking about him is because it's controversial to an extent. We go out, we get David Montgomery, we give him more money than Jamaal Williams got in New Orleans, and we have to wonder to ourselves, is this a better back? You have to remember he was doing this behind a Chicago offensive line. Very good friend of mine. Loves the Bears, very knowledgeable on the Bears. He's actually been on this show talking about, I think the Bears, but definitely the Bulls. And he was talking and saying David Montgomery had nowhere to run. He would get the ball, guys would be in the backfield, and that might help his forced missed tackle rate because he had more opportunities to help people miss a tackle. But he was averaging what Williams was averaging behind a garbage offensive line. I can't state this more clearly, a garbage offensive line. And Chicago fans know it, And the Pro Football Focus, the PFF grades for their offensive line aren't quite as mean. They wouldn't classify Chicago's offensive line as garbage. They would classify it as below average. But they still know it's not a good line. The Detroit Lions offensive line is very good. And if we're bringing back Vaitai and we have Graham Glasgow and come on, then you also have 3 Pro Bowlers, and then the one guy who never gets a Pro Bowl, but he's very good, Taylor Decker. Not never, but anyways. David Montgomery should not average 3.9 yards per carry next year. It should be considerably better behind this offensive line. And if you have an offensive line that's going to open up holes, and you add in a running back who has tied for the highest in the NFL, so as good as any running back at making people miss tackles. So when you get him in the open and he can miss tackles, that can be a dangerous combination. I'm not saying David Montgomery is this guy who's going to bust off 50, 60, 70, 80-yard runs. I just want the guy that's going to consistently make 5, 8, or 10, or 15. And he is that guy. Jamaal Williams is the guy who makes 5 yards, 6 yards because he falls forward. I don't have anything against Jamaal Williams. Kind of. I don't like the disrespected thing. And I've been playing that over and over in my mind. Maybe he feels disrespected by the offer because they didn't offer him what they ended up signing Montgomery to. And so maybe he feels like he's an on par or better running back than Montgomery. But here are the facts. Montgomery is better at making people miss. His numbers are as good behind a worst offensive line, and he's 2.5 years younger. We cannot continue to make the argument that Williams was better. Now, we might get Montgomery. He might get injured. He might not run well, and he might not fit our system. There's a lot of things at play here. And so we can't say this beyond the shadow of a doubt, but I do think it has to be said. Brad Holmes is not afraid. He's not afraid. He's not afraid to say, okay, if you don't like the price that we think you're worth, you can go. We're thankful for your time here, but I'm not going to overpay you just because our fans love you. What fans love more than players, and I think all of you listening, comment if you disagree. You love wins more than players. I guarantee you any fan here would take a playoff win over any player on this team. Any fan watching this would take a Super Bowl over any one player. And if you can bring in players to get you closer to that goal, if you can bring in players to get you over the hump, you do it. You do it. This happens with every team. There are players or coaches that are good to a point, and then you have to move on past them in order to get over the hump. The Detroit Pistons with Rick Carlisle. Great coach. This was back in the early 2000s. Larry Brown, NBA Finals. We win. We win a championship. Happened again in the NBA with the Toronto Raptors. This isn't the only time that we've seen this happen. This isn't the only time. We've seen times where new coaches, new players come in. Deion Sanders, San Francisco 49ers, can't get past the Cowboys. He goes there in 1994. He goes there in 94 to the 49ers. They win a Super Bowl. Then he goes to the Cowboys, and what did the Cowboys do? They win a Super Bowl because he brought different swagger. Now, I'm not comparing David Montgomery to Deion Sanders. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, are you willing to take a strength or a position that is good and make it better? Or are you just going to sit in Goodville? Because Jamaal Williams was good for what he did. But there's potential for better with Montgomery, and I love this stat to back that up. All right, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Would love to hear your comments below. Let us know what you think. Do you like this stat? Is it blowing smoke? Does it matter at all? I think it does. See you on the next one.